God, grant us always to seek the truth, come whence it may, cost what it will. Amen.
Amen.
So about 25, maybe it was closer to 30 years ago, I was a bookstore manager. I managed a Borders bookstore. And one of my best friends was also a bookstore manager. I was in Columbus, Ohio, and she was in Minneapolis. And so we ran the same business. We knew each other's business. And we decided that we would take vacations together. So she and her partner and my partner and I went on vacation together. And while we were on vacation, and this was before the time of cell phones, I was calling my store, checking on my assistant managers. They were calling me. So I was in the hotel room taking calls and making calls and telling everybody, I'll catch up with you. Y'all go on ahead. And finally, on only about the second day, because Kathy didn't tolerate foolishness a lot, said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm checking on my store. I'm checking with my managers. Aren't you doing the same? And she said, no, my people don't even know where I am. I won't be calling them at all. I'll check in with them when I get back. And I looked at her and I said, well, but what if something happens? And she said, well, there's nothing I can do about it from here. I can't fix anything from here. And I said, well, what if the building burns down? She said, I don't have a hose from here that I can help put it out. So they'll figure it out. And I remember that it shook me, that conversation, because what I realized was I was on vacation, but I wasn't resting. And I wasn't at all present to my partner or my friends or the activities we were having, because I was still focused on what was going on hundreds or thousands of miles away, and yet thinking I was on vacation. And then I would get home from vacation and I would be exhausted because I hadn't actually rested. And that conversation really changed me. And I was in my, I don't know, probably late 20s, early 30s. And it helped me start at least to rethink about what it meant to be present to people, what the difference was between my work and my life. And it started me, certainly didn't cure everything for me in that moment, but it started me thinking about my need for rest and my need to differentiate my work life from my home life. And I thought of it today as I was reading, or in this past week, as I was reading this passage from Jesus and thinking about just how busy we are. We are a busy, busy people, we Americans in particular. Even before the pandemic hit and disrupted our lives so cataclysmically, we were busy. In fact, there are more studies than you can count about busyness. I asked the Google, and she gave me bunches and bunches of references about this. There are so many studies about our actual busyness and about this busyness, this idea of busyness that our culture kind of holds up as a symbol of status and achievement. The busier you are, the more important you must be. And there's this author and leadership strategist, his name is Dan Pontefract, and he calls this the age of freneticism, that being always on and always busy. And sadly, this isn't just about adults. Our kids are living this way too. There are plenty of studies as well that show the pressures that our children feel to overachieve and to excel and to join every club and pile on every extra activity. And it's having this enormous impact on them and how they develop and how they understand the world and the people around them. And certainly technology is part of the challenge, part of the problem. With our smartphones and our other devices, we have now this 24-hour access to information from news sites and from social media. And we're rarely disconnected from those things. I read a study that said, on average, Americans check their phones at least once every 12 minutes, or 80 times a day. Now imagine that each of these times we linger for just 5 minutes, checking the news real quick, or checking our social media, or scrolling through a couple emails or texts. That's 400 minutes. That's nearly a quarter of our day. And it doesn't take into account the amount of time we actually need to spend on devices for our work or for school. It's a lot. And what much of the research shows is that we are way out of balance. And interestingly, for as connected as we are very disconnected. We are rarely fully present to any one person or activity or task because we're really busy trying to be present to so many things, to all of them at once. But it's not just the advanced technology that's causing our busyness. It's the increased workloads that are the result of this kind of do more with less business culture that has been developed over the last number of decades. It's the increased number of activities our kids are involved in that require lots of scheduling and coordination. It's all of the things we think we should be doing to keep up with everyone else or to keep up with these crazy busy schedules. It's caring for aging parents. It's a lot. It's all of this. And we take on so much, and it's exhausting us. We average less sleep and less downtime than generations that came before us. We don't rest. And in fact, there's an aspect in our culture, in our work culture in particular, that tells us that needing a break, needing to slow down, needing to rest is actually a weakness, or it shows some kind of lack of drive. And it's all just too much, friends. It's too much. We are literally and figuratively, physically and emotionally and spiritually killing ourselves. We need rest. We need balance. We need to reconnect with ourselves, with one another, with God. And that's part of what Jesus is talking about when he makes this offer to us in the gospel today. He sees us, and he offers himself as a balance, as a counterweight to the burdens that we carry. Come to me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Jesus calls us to rest and to restore ourselves, to be whole. He did this with his first disciples. Remember in Mark's gospel, right before the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus sees how tired they are. And he sends them off to a deserted place to be by themselves and to rest for a while so that they can be ready for the next steps in the journey. And Jesus models it for us himself again and again and again. How often does Jesus, after being out for days and healing people and speaking and teaching and traveling, does he go and he goes off by himself to rest and to pray and to disconnect from all of the busyness? He goes to restore himself so that he can return to the work he is called to do and to be fully present. And he tells us we must do this too. We must rest. We must take the time to restore our bodies and our minds and our spirits if we are to be whole. We must rest if we're to be fully present to ourselves, to God, to our families, to the people in our lives, to the challenges we face. And I think particularly in this time of unease, rest is more important than ever. We are exhausted. I hear it all the time. I experience it myself. From trying to navigate this world that we're in right now, it is exhausting. And rest doesn't just mean taking time off from work or taking vacation, because the reality is there are a whole lot of people among us that don't have that luxury. They don't have the privilege of 4 weeks of vacation time or 20 days of personal time or sick time. But it doesn't mean that we can't find rest. The poet David White writes in one of his books that to rest is to give up on worrying and fretting that there is something wrong with the world unless we're there to put it right. In essence, to rest is to let go of things sometimes, to let go of the things we can't control and let go of the need to try to control everything. In this, we can find rest. We'll find rest in disconnecting from all of our devices and reconnecting with people and with the world around us. I've made a little rule for myself that when I take a walk, when I walk my dog a few times a day, unless it is literally life or death, unless literally someone in our community is actively dying and I need to be prepared to respond to that, I don't take my phone with me. My phone stays home. I don't listen to anything. I don't listen to music or podcasts. I just walk. I walk in the world. And I look at people and I look at houses and I look at birds and nature, and it's restful. It gives me rest. We'll find rest in just breathing, slowly and intentionally paying attention to our breath, even if it's just for a couple of minutes. We can find rest in beauty, in a piece of music or a piece of artwork, watching Hamilton like a whole bunch of us did. We find rest in laughter. It actually gives our body rest. And in weeping sometimes, to let go of the anxiety or the fear or the sadness or the grief that we're carrying, to weep and let it go so that we can rest. We will find rest when we seek to be whole. And the other way to find rest that Jesus teaches us here is to understand that we do not have to do all this alone. Jesus uses the example of a yoke, a wooden crosspiece that's fastened over the neck of two animals, often oxen or draft horses, and it's connected to a plow or a cart that then they can pull together. And what I love about this image is the balance. A yoke requires that these two animals work in perfect unison, that the weight is distributed evenly. And that doesn't happen right away. You just don't grab two animals, put a yoke on them, and they immediately know and do the right thing and work together. Often, what they do is they take an animal that has been in a yoke before, and they put a new animal with that one, so that the other animal, so that the experienced ox can teach the other how to get in rhythm, how to find a rhythm so that it doesn't hurt, so that not one of them is carrying a heavier load than the other. They learn to trust one another. And they learn that once they find that rhythm, the burden is actually lighter when they pull in unison and they share that load evenly. And this is what Jesus offers us. Not to remove all of the burdens from our lives, but to share with us in carrying them. To help us rest in them sometimes and rest from them. For us to learn by being in relationship with him how to walk with others then, how to share their burdens. We often think we have to carry it all ourselves, the whole load, the whole yoke, that those burdens are ours alone to bear. But Jesus reminds us that he's always there. He's always there, sharing the load with us, walking in unison with us. And that then he teaches us we can and should do the same for others. With this metaphor of a yoke, Jesus is teaching us something about being in relationship with one another. He's teaching us about this need for connection. While we may think of ourselves, particularly Americans, as rugged individualists, we actually need each other far more than I think we ever acknowledged. We actually need to learn to share the burdens of others, to see the challenges that others face as our challenges and burdens too. To be willing to yoke ourselves with those whose experiences are different from our own, and to learn from them, and then walk in unison with them, and to help carry that burden. Whether it's the fight for racial equity or the need to stop the spread of a deadly virus, the burdens are heavy right now. But carrying them together does help us each lighten the load just a little bit. Because we are inextricably linked to one another. Your well-being and mine are one and the same. This is what Jesus is teaching us. This is how we're called to live as his disciples. Just imagine for a minute what the world would be like, what our country would look like, if we chose to yoke ourselves to one another and bear burdens together, instead of expecting that either we or everybody else will carry their own and figure it out by themselves. What if we walked in unison to stop a disease from infecting more? Imagine what that curve might look like. What if we walked in unison to ensure that the lives of Black and brown people are valued and honored? What might that look like? What if we walked in unison to build an economy that works for everybody? so that essential workers actually are treated like they're essential? What if we walked in unison to protect our planet? If we agreed that some things just need to be done together, and it doesn't at all take away my independence or my individualism, but in fact, it makes me more whole. What if we did that? We can. Jesus gives us this really great model, and not only gives us the model, but promises to be in it with us, to help make the burden lighter if we take him up on that offer, if we walk with him and learn from him. He offers us rest and renewal to help us remain present and to have the energy for the work we need to do. He shows us how to live humbly in the world, connected to one another and at peace with one another and with ourselves. He shows us that connection is vital and that sharing burdens is vital. So first, we must rest. We must rest. Find rest how and where you can during this time. These have been difficult, difficult months. And they have placed burdens on us that probably none of us could have ever imagined. Sometimes we don't even recognize them as burdens until you take a step away. So please rest. Help each other rest. If you have an opportunity to rest and take time away and you feel reinvigorated, and there's someone you know who doesn't have that opportunity, reach out. Ask them how you can help. Share the yoke with them. If you're someone who needs rest and doesn't know how to get it right now, reach out. Ask someone in this community, hey, I need a hand. You share this with me. You put this yoke on with me for a few minutes. And then, when we are rested and we are restored and we are healed, then let's take up Jesus' yoke and share in his work of restoration and reconciliation and healing for the whole world. Amen.
Amen.